Houston, we have a problem. We get into it next on Beyond the Locker Room. The Houston Rockets have been a bit of an enigma pretty much, I would say, for about halfway point of the season, where they started off pretty much looking like gangbusters early in the season. Came off looking pretty, strong. It looked like the Kevin Durant interjection was coming along pretty seamlessly, and I would say they've the wheels have fallen off, but certain habits and certain things have come up, and it's looked a little shaky in the last month or so. And so you gotta ask yourself if Houston's really a contender or a pretender, and they're looking more and more like a pretender as the season progresses. So I'm gonna get into today's episode, just kind of break down what I see as three issues I think are the concerns with the Rockets moving into the playoffs. They've dipped down to the 6th seed as we speak today. And I'm not sure if they're going to get out of that seed. I mean, I would say the Lakers are creating a little bit of separation from the other three teams, but between Minnesota, Denver, and them, I would say right now they're playing 5. I think they're 5-5 in their last 10. It's not great. I mean, they're fortunate that Ant-Man's hurt at the moment, but that's the only thing that's going to get them to move up. But I don't see them getting a home court advantage anytime soon with how they're playing. So let's get into it. So reason number one, and this one's a pretty obvious one, I think, if you've watched the Rockets play for any little bit of time. The turnovers. My gosh, I've never seen a team that's as talented as the Rockets. As talented as the Rockets be so sloppy when it comes to certain things. Like, it's just, oh my God, it's just rough, man. When you watch it, it's all sorts of stuff, from travels to bad passes, lost balls, offensive fouls. 5-second violations. Speaking of second violations, I watched Kevin Durant in a game, not once, but twice, get caught with an 8-second call for a violation for not getting the ball out over half court. I have never seen that happen. I can't really think of that happening at least once, maybe in watching maybe a season of games. That might happen once or twice. I watch a game. To happen in the same game twice, the same like that's inexcusable, especially with a player of his caliber. That's a whole. We'll get to him in a second, but that's hey man, that's not that kind of speaks to the carelessness. The careless ball handling, loose dribbles. They throw these crazy cross-court passes at times where you're wondering, where are these going? Poor decision-making under pressure. They've choked away leads. They had one the other night against Minnesota where they're up 13 against a depleted Minnesota team, as before no Ant-Man and others, and found a way to choke away that game in overtime. I watched one about 3 weeks ago when they're in the Garden. 18-point lead on that one. I say, hold my beer. 18-point lead in that game on the road. And they had no idea. They just were 5 guys that met each other on the court sometimes during that game. Ime is beside himself at this point. Half-court struggles when the game gets tight. There's a lack of composure. No one seems to know who's going to grab the reins late in games. And we'll get that more in a moment. It's really... and there's a youth element to it, but I'm not buying the youth element as much as maybe some folks like to say. I'm not buying it as much, but there is something to it. I mean, they have no Van Vliet. We know the situation with him being out for the season. Dylan Brooks moving on. There does seem to be a little bit of there's not enough grown-ups right now to kind of deal with things, and that seems to be a bit of a problem. So that's issue number one, and obviously that would just drive a coach crazy. Turnovers. Issue number two. This one's a little dicier. I would say refer to it as lack of leadership, and it kind of spills into why they have these brain-numbing, collapses in the fourth quarter. There's no true on-court leader on this team, and it really does speak, quite honestly, to, I guess, one of the great flaws, the great flaw in Kevin Durant's historic career, that he's never been a leader. If you try to put him in a leadership position, he's not going to be the one to do so. For one thing, he's out there allegedly got burner accounts that are ripping on his teammates. So that's a whole other discussion, which, by the way, You know, Kenyon mentions a basketball rewind offline. I might be open to this discussion. I would check the numbers, but they really haven't looked great ever since the All-Star break when that news started leaking out that was his burner account, allegedly. Okay, but Durant has never really shown any sort of idea of like taking ownership, taking leadership. Yeah, and he's the greatest number 2 we've ever seen. He's not really a number 1. I think when you put him in a position as a number 1, and I mean a number 1 in the truest sense, not only the best player on the team, but a guy that takes on the role of the leadership, you're asking for trouble. That now has been proven. Folks could jump on Westbrook all they want, but Westbrook was the leader of Oklahoma City. And that's the reason why I think they were still able to function. Durant was able to kind of be Durant and do what he had to do, because Westbrook took on that role and that mantra. When you look at Golden State, it's quite obvious. When it came to leadership, he had to do anything. All he had to do was come in the Bay Area and hoop. That's it. At the same time, he still wasn't happy that he wasn't considered to be the guy or the man or whatever you want to call it, which I don't know what he expected going to Golden State. And then afterward, going to Brooklyn, which really showed the utmost disaster. Brooklyn and Phoenix actually is a combo where, when things go south, he's not the guy that's going to grab guys by the scruff of their neck and say, okay, tonight we just ain't losing tonight, man. Everyone better get their ish together type of thing. That's not him. He can come in there, in some ways very similar, a persona similar to Tim Duncan, but Tim Duncan still had leadership qualities where he, when he spoke, it was with purpose. It was purposeful. And guys got it. He didn't speak much, but when he did, everyone listened. Durant doesn't really garner that type of respect I get from his teammates. I think most of them like him. Obviously, they know his game's tight, but they're not really seeing that from him. And I think in those circumstances where Kevin Durant is to be seen as that is trouble. And I think right now with Houston and without Fred VanVleet, I mean, I know a lot of Raptor fans may not want to hear it, but Fred VanVleet brings a lot of leadership qualities, and that's missing. He could take on that role while Kevin Durant does what he does, which is get buckets. But right now, that is what they need right now, and he's not the person to come in on the white horse to do so. That's just not what he's about, and it's showing right now as we're seeing these games kind of unraveling right before our eyes. Also, too, some of the young guys, they got rid of Green and they made the choice between him and Şengün. Obviously, they made the choice. Şengün, in this case here, fantastic player, love me the librarian, but he too right now, he and Thompson have not shown yet that they can step into that role yet. For say some of the other young guys, because that would be fair to Durant. And you don't want to hear no 40-year-old or almost 40-year-old guy talking to them. It's like old man off my lawn type of mentality. You need someone of your own age at times, sometimes to kind of get in your grill or to get things right. And that's right now, as great as the talents they are, that is not happy at the moment. I see those two guys being the next possible guys as the leaders, but they're not there. They're not there quite yet, and I think that's showing at the moment as well too. And even with the structure from the bench, as I said before, execution suffers without players enforcing, forcing the floor. I've seen Reed Shepherd take some wild shots, boy. I appreciate the young man's confidence, but I saw from day one, especially this season when Durant was out there late in the game, and that was actually a forebearing what's to come, because that game against Oklahoma City, it looked like they had control of that game, and yet somehow still the game got in overtime, and you can see them kind of unraveling then too. So, but they lack direction and control right now at this point here, which then leads to the third one, so we've talked about kind of the mental aspect, the leadership aspect, when it comes to mental leadership, when it comes to turnovers and the lack of leadership. But there's also another part too, man. Look, man, you got put in the work. And too many times, man, the Rockets often lose the quote unquote effort plays. Too cool for school sometimes. Because you're a real talented team. I don't know, you think you're anointed or whatever the case may be, but there's this mentality that I think the Rockets come off with sometimes, as if they expect teams just to give it to them. Rebounding issues. Opponents are generating tons of second chances. This is where the Steve Adams part comes in, where he's missed. Defensive toughness, they struggle to contain drives and absorb, contact in the paint. They're very, even though they're a tall team, they're not a physical team. There's not a lot of big bulky dudes, with the exception of Şengün, and he's still a bit of a finessey player too. the hustle plays, the loose balls, too many times, these collapses I'm watching, dudes are just not even trying to dive for the ball or anything like that. And, and then there's an identity problem with them as well, too. It's like they don't consistently impose themselves physically from on either end, quite honestly. Thompson a little bit defensively, but overall, it's just like, we just come down here, whoever's got the ball, we take a jump shot. Like, pass it a couple times, we take a jump shot. And when the shots aren't falling, man, they don't seem to have like an option number 2, which really should be Şengün the paint as one option, which they do go to. I'm not saying they don't. They do go to him at times down the paint. But they gotta find some other place. You can't keep going to your fastball, because some days you may not have your fastball, and you might have to use it. You might have to use your off-speed pitches. And for them, they seem to struggle to find their stuff when it comes to that, when they don't have their fastball going. And they're all kind of interconnected, man. It's like the turnovers, give away possessions, no leadership, no in-game correction, which leads to a lot of the turnovers, and then the lack of physicality and the effort, the loss of effort, on the boards at other places, kind of compounds the situation where you have these dramatic, fall-offs in this case for Ime and company. I don't know what's gonna happen. I think Houston's gonna be a ugly exit. Right now, they said before, they're in 6, which means they'll play the Lakers. What I've seen is that the Lakers dismantled them a few weeks ago, late in the second half, once again, when they faded. They were in control of that game in the first half, and then once, more force was being done with the Lakers, it was a wrap. I don't know if they're going to get more than one game actually playing the Lakers, funny enough. I just don't think so. But who knows? Maybe it's Denver, and I think that matchup's even worse for them in some ways. So we'll see where things go with Houston. But boy, a lot of money's been put in this team, and they moved off of Green, one of their young pieces, for Durant, and we've heard that story many times before when it comes to Kevin Durant's career, and he ain't delivering again. And we have another team with a lot of question marks, as my dad said, a lot of sickles over their heads, asking what the heck's going on in Houston. Well, at least they have a new. At least the comments are coming back, so they have that to think of. Anyways, we'll leave it there, folks. Hey, man, Rockets fans, wish you luck, man. Once again, you know where to find me on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, and of course on Blue Sky. You always can find me right here on YouTube. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. The subscribe is for free, folks. It's tough times out in these streets. This is something for free, guys. As always, guys, I appreciate the support. Be safe out there. Keep it locked. Peace.